Hello and welcome to a special edition of the AppDevANGLE. My name is Paul Nashawaty, coming to you live from Google Cloud Next 2026. I'm here with Bobby Allen, a fellow North Carolinian, and we're here
Yes.
to talk to you about some of the great things that are happening at the show. You
Mhm.
doing, Bobby?
I'm good, Paul. How are you?
Great, great. We're here to talk about Google Insights on GKE and containers. But first, let's talk about who you are and what you do.
Well, Paul, thanks for having me on the program. I appreciate it. So, my name is Bobby Allen. I'm a product manager for GKE. I want to warn your audience, if you look me up on LinkedIn, I made up my own title. I call myself a cloud therapist. I am actually a product manager. Think of cloud therapists like Spider-Man and product managers like Peter Parker. So, that's kind of my real name. But I get to do a lot of things with GKE, Google Kubernetes Engine, for those who don't know. I'm sure a lot of your audience does. But I get to speak at conferences like this. I get to do keynotes. I get to work with analysts like yourself and honestly just try to represent Kubernetes to the world to try to make sure it's relevant. So if I would summarize my job, it would be insight from and influence on. Take insight from analysts, from the community, from students, from professionals to make the product better. And then how do we work with people like yourselves who influence customers and make sure you're armed with the information that you need to help them make informed decisions and also influence parts inside of Google so that we land the products, don't just launch them. I want to also say to your audience, even though I'm a product manager on GKE, I don't know everything. So I may say I don't know to some of your questions, or I might give you a short answer because I'm not the expert. And I want your audience to know clearly, Paul, this is literally my day job. I work in AI infrastructure. I'm in the heart of all the things that are happening right now, and I can't keep up with all this stuff. So if they feel like technology is moving really fast or they may be overwhelmed, they're in good company because that's me every day.
Well, Bobby, there's a ton of people here, right? There's 30,000, over 30,000 people here, right?
Yes,
And
yes,
there's a lot of buzz, and so everyone's
tons.
here to learn. So
Yes,
everything you're talking about, people are trying to, they're thirsty for the knowledge. They're trying to
yes,
understand what's going on.
yeah.
The keynotes were amazing. The developer keynote, you crushed it. I thought it
Thank
was
you,
amazing.
thank you.
When I look at everything that's happening, in the agentic world of, where Google's going,
Hmm.
there's the pivoting to agentic infrastructure, right? We see
Hmm.
that here at the show, the narrative has shifted from AI to chats to AI acts, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
we also see that GKE means pivoting the body or providing the body for these AI agents to live in.
Hmm.
So the question that we talked about was, we've heard a lot this week about the shift from generative to agentic AI.
Hmm.
How is GKE evolving specifically to support autonomous agents and the long-running progression of multi-step reasoning and deep integration with enterprise data?
Yeah. Yeah. So loaded question. I'll try to unpack that.
Okay.
So before we go into that, let me give kind of Bobby's buckets for AI because
Okay.
they may be helpful for the audience. So, and I think this applies to agents as well as AI in general. I think there's building it, building with it, and using it. So think building with AI, building AI, and using AI. And I think GKE kind of plays in all of those buckets. But if I would distinguish those, I think when you're building something like building large language models, building agents, doing inference, LLMs, things like that. GK plays a big role in that because a lot of agents are trained in that. A lot of large language models are trained in that. When you're talking about using agents, that's a little bit different. But building it and building with it is kind of where GK plays a lot. I think in terms of as we shift to agents, which is natural, right? Because people don't just want answers. They don't just want chatbots.
Right.
They want something that's taking a job off their plate and reducing some toil. Two particular features that are really helpful for that are agent sandboxes and pod snapshots. So when you have agents that are going to do more work for you, you've got to have some level of isolation or protection,
Mhm.
right? Because you have these agents that sometimes hallucinate. Sometimes they may not do exactly what you want. Sometimes they may get the intent wrong of what you want them to do. You have to have some guardrails. And so the sandbox is a great kind of protection so that actions or code that's written by an agent don't just have the ability to run amok in your environment. So you can have a level of protection and insulation so it doesn't kind of blow up your core applications. And then pod snapshots allow you to have things resume faster because agents are often tied to people, and so agents that have high latency or that are unresponsive lead to unresponsive applications and unhappy customers.
Right.
And so you need to make sure that you can be dynamic and responsive so people are getting what they need because there's often a person on the other end of that agent request.
Well, so let's talk about accountability then, right? Because
Hmm.
accountability is not just for the human; it's also for the agents.
Yes. Yeah.
That's
So
something people often forget.
it's huge. So looking at delegation of authority, looking at what are agents allowed to do, what do you want them to do, That's also where that's a whole different topic, but like where evals come in. What does good look like?
Right.
If you say that I want to have, a certain meal for dinner, I want a steak. What does a good steak look like? That might be different for you. I'm a salmon guy personally, so I'd want salmon instead of steak. But you might want to have your steak one way. I might want to have the dish a different way. But what does good look like, and how do we measure whether the agent got you there, and how much it costs to get you there when we talk about tokens and things like that?
Yeah, well, my steak will be plant-based because I'm a vegetarian.
Okay,
So
there you go.
that's how
So
that
you're gonna
works
have
with
plant.
me.
I'm gonna have fish.
There
So
we go.
steak
So
was a bad example.
it's all good. It's all
Yeah.
good. But so we looked at the keynotes talked about this. We saw this in the announcements that GKE is as the AI hypercomputer control plane.
Hmm.
Right, Google is increasingly positioning GKE as not just a container orchestrator, but a control plane for the massive AI training
Yeah.
and inferencing workloads, like the
Hmm.
130,000 node cluster demo.
Hmm.
That was quite impressive, actually.
Hmm.
And but when I look at this, the questions that come up, there was a lot of announcements around hardware. There was
Hmm.
lots of announcements around TPU and Ironwood
Hmm.
and the new GKE inferencing optimization.
Hmm.
Have we reached a point where GKE is effectively the operating system for AI at this point?
I think it is in many ways. I think it has been quietly for a long time, but when you look at hardware accelerators, special types of storage, and things like that, just because of the level of control you have with Kubernetes, which is funny that we're seeing this reinvention of this new wave. Kubernetes is 11 years old at this point, and it's having a whole second wind now that AI is coming along. Part of it is because of the control you have, the separation of duties, the ability to orchestrate things and be insulated from the hardware, the ability, quite frankly, to run Kubernetes in multiple places,
Right.
multiple clouds, on-prem, off-prem, other devices, at the edge. It just does a lot of the things that we needed to do really well. So to answer your question, yes, I do feel like you could say that GKE is the operating system or the control plane. Some people say the brain of the AI hypercomputer or the AI stack, whatever you want to call it, wherever you're running. Kubernetes is the heart of that, and GKE definitely does that. I want to give you an example, though.
Okay.
So I got to do the dev keynote today. We're going to talk about that tomorrow or later in the program, I think. But I got to do a breakout session yesterday.
Okay.
And the breakout session was called Automating Excellence, and it was about KCC, Kubernetes Config Connector. So, layman's terms for the audience, Kubernetes Config Connector allows you to manage all of your cloud resources with Kubernetes configuration. So, not just pods and containers and things like that, but think databases, think storage, think IAM, network policies. So, the Kubernetes blast radius or impact is expanding out, if you wanted to all of the different cloud resources you have. So, think about using YAML and applying that to set permissions for buckets and databases and things. Like, it's really amazing. So I like to use metaphors. I know you know that. So here's my metaphor. Okay. I was telling people that we have to look at this almost like Shark Tank,
Okay.
right? So on Shark Tank, you had entrepreneurs who would come and pitch to these investors. And what you're trying to get is you're trying to understand where the sharks are willing to put time into something that solves a persistent problem, that scales, and that's going to give them an investment on their time back. And I think a lot of your audience is similar, Paul, because they've got to be ruthless with their time.
They do.
There are all these options, all these services, but and we know there are tons of products on Shark Tank that have been successful. But the one that I drew a parallel with was there's a little round smiley face sponge thing called the Scrub Daddy. And what I didn't know, Paul, my wife illuminated me to this, is that you can put the Scrub Daddy in the dishwasher. I don't know if your audience knows it, but when it gets dirty, you can literally put it in the top rack and clean it again. And so my statement in there was KCC is to GKE as the top rack of the dishwasher is to a Scrub Daddy.
Okay.
So KCC not only extends resources, but it reconciles resources back to their original state. So if you deploy a database with KCC and someone corrupts the permissions or changes the storage bucket, KCC will reconcile or clean that back to the original state.
Oh,
And
interesting.
so Kubernetes and GKE is now extending out the different parts of the environment and can get you back to a state that could increasingly have dirt or configuration drift, almost like in our house. You've got a way to reconcile that. So Kubernetes is at the heart of even more than we think now.
So it's a safety net, right?
It's a
It
safety
allows you to
net.
get back to the normal configuration. Now,
Yes.
I will say that most of the conversations I get into with organizations, the two areas that people often tell me that are barriers for their initiatives is complexity and skill gap issues.
Yes.
So let's talk about complexity because that sounded
Yeah.
a little bit complex, but I think
Yeah.
in the kind of nuts and bolts of it, it's
Mhm.
not as complex as it may sound, right?
Correct.
So when we look
Correct.
at solving the complexity versus velocity paradox.
Mm-hmm.
There are new tools that like Application Design Center and Vibe Design.
Mm-hmm.
They were announced, right? They were talked about,
Mm-hmm.
and to really aim to simplify the developer experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
Take away that complexity, allow for more. I would say, from what I was seeing, even along for the lines of business with a citizen developer to do development. So
Yes.
you don't have to be a professional developer to do this.
Correct.
So the question I have is the vibe coding or agentic workflow sessions
Mm-hmm.
that focus around developer speed.
Mm-hmm.
How is GKE abstracting away the infrastructure tax so developers can basically look at straight from moving from the IDE
Yeah.
to planetary scale deployment without needing to have a PhD in Kubernetes,
Yeah.
reducing the complexity?
Yeah. So I mean, one of the best answers for that is GK Autopilot, right? It's a
Mm-hmm.
mode of operation. It's still the same product, but it's a mode where you're not as good as how your infrastructure is not dependent on how good you are at guessing what you need. It will kind of be elastic and expand to what your workload requires. So if you need to scale up or scale down, if you need to scale horizontally or vertically, Autopilot does a lot of that for you. You're also billed based on what you're consuming, not what you allocated. And so we also roll out a lot of updates automatically to that to help with performance, pod scheduling, things that save you time. So to net it out, a lot of the performance things in autopilot allow you to either do more with less or do more with less or serve more people for the same resources. So that's part of how we're doing that. And then we do a lot with Gemini now. So,
Yeah.
part of my demo today was about, in the dev keynote, was about translating intent into infrastructure.
Yeah.
And so, I want to give a contrarian view a little bit to vibe coding. I talked about a term called vibe clouding because
Yes.
I think vibe coding is often seen as very greenfield
Mm-hmm.
and very kind of like pristine state, white piece of paper, nothing else already there. And I think vibe clouding is a little bit more complex where you're talking about impacting an existing system. And so that was kind of what we did in the keynote today. So um, executive summary again for your audience, I wanted to impact my environment and I did that by talking. So I used the voice prompt to do a couple things, to convert a Cloud Run app to a GKE app and to deploy a local model of Gemma 4 into that same cluster. I didn't type anything. I didn't have to be an expert in YAML. I didn't have to focus on configuration. I literally said, convert this Cloud Run app to GKE, deploy Gemma, and Gemini Cloud Assist took care of all the translation.
I thought that was so cool. You used the
Thank you.
microphone and you talked through it. It
I
was
didn't
awesome.
I didn't type anything, right?
Yeah.
Who would do a Kubernetes demo and not type anything?
It was really cool.
But I think back to your point, Paul. So GKE is introducing things like autopilot to make a lot of the infrastructure simpler, but then using something like a Gemini Cloud Assist to orchestrate that by way of MCP and things like that that are becoming standard now, where I can declare my intent and focus on an outcome and let that handle the details, the syntax, the YAML, etc. I mean, it literally wrote a configuration file and can apply that and deploy things in my cluster.
And you did that with natural language, and you did that with just communicating.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's why I was saying the citizen developer is really going to have that
Yeah.
advantage now.
I think the citizen developer, and I think what's happening is, I think a lot of people can be builders who are not necessarily developers.
Oh, correct. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
You don't have to know the code, the syntax. If you know where you want to go, there are a lot of recovering developers like myself. I don't get to touch code nearly as much as I would like to. Again, that's what my degrees are in, but you get into the business of product management and other things, and you don't get to dabble as much as you'd like. But I know what the system should look like in the end. I know where it should go. I know what the outcome should look like. If I can delegate the details, I can get a whole lot done.
Yeah.
And that's what I think we're showing people. We're reducing that tax by letting something like GCA be that work or the operator agent to turn my intent into infrastructure.
All right, so let's talk about that because I think that's a big factor here. When you look at operational efficiencies, is effectively what you're talking about. Innovation is expensive, right?
Yes.
It can be,
Yes.
right? And then, with AI bills, the top concerns for CFOs, what are the obvious ways that GKE can help teams optimize costs, perhaps through autopilot, like you were talking about, but capabilities like custom compute classes?
Yeah.
This wasn't possible a year ago. This is something
Correct.
that's new.
Correct. Custom compute classes has actually been around for a couple of years. What we're seeing now, though, is we're seeing customers that have used it through things like Black Friday, Cyber Monday. Like the proof points are massive, like big mega scale customers that have handled loads in it. So I would say custom compute class is more proven now because we've seen it go through its paces. So, and again, for the audience, CCC is essentially the node API for GKE. So it lets you mix and match different node types. It lets you talk about the spirit of what you want. And then based on capacity and what's available, it'll get you that. But you can specify things like on-demand instances, spot instances, reserved instances. So if you've got things you've already paid for, it'll use that first, and then it can go to kind of, it's a priority list of compute that you want. And if we're out of this particular thing, it'll give you something else that's close to that. You can look at things like mixing and matching hardware accelerators, TPUs, GPUs, etc. So it's a great way to talk about what you want and use what you've already paid for, or even use things like spot instances, right? If you've got batch workloads, for example, that can be preempted, and you can leverage spot capacity that might be really inexpensive, you can specify that in CCC in terms of the priority of compute. So CCC is a good one. Like I said, faster pod scheduling. And the reason that's a big deal is because when it comes to customer responsiveness, a lot of times we keep a lot of excess capacity on hand to be able to serve people. So, for example, I like using food analogies a lot. I'm in the South, so I have to talk about Chick-fil-A, right? If it took me 10 minutes to make fries at Chick-fil-A, I can't make the first fries when the person's in the drive-thru because they're going to be mad.
Right.
But if I can turn those fries over quicker, I have a lot less waste. And so essentially what GK has done is, since we've reduced the scheduling or the time it takes to get things ready, like pods to be ready, we don't have to waste that excess capacity because we're ready for demand that may not materialize yet. So we can be a lot more dynamic and flexible.
Yeah, and this is actually really important to when you think about the heritage environments too, right?
Yes,
Like this is legacy to AI ready. That's really a big factor.
it's
So
huge.
so you're optimizing for costs. You're looking at your existing infrastructure. In my practice, I deal a lot with past, present, and future. I deal a
Yes,
lot with how do you move your heritage environment? Do you encapsulate it? Do you leave it alone? Do you build
yes,
new systems of engagement?
yes,
All these pieces are big factors, and but
huge.
many leaders feel they're stuck in legacy debt, right?
Yeah.
They see that AI ambitions are not being able to be achieved.
Hmm.
And maybe you can walk us through a little bit about how the new AI migration tools helps
Yeah.
bridge the gap between the old and new.
Yeah. So migration is a whole separate topic. That could be a podcast in and of
I'm
itself.
sure, yes.
And I did startups for 10 years before coming to Google, and I've got a lot of battle scars to prove it. That's part of why I call myself a cloud therapist, because there are times I felt like I needed to lay on the couch and cry first before doing some of those projects. But but modernization and migration is interesting because I think we have to get back to your, not just your aspirations, but like what are you willing and able to change?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us are not honest about that. So the two questions I would always ask as a consultant in the startup world is, what does better mean to you? And what are you willing and able to change? And if you don't answer those questions honestly, it's hard for anybody to help you regardless of tooling or processes. So for example, does better mean faster? Does it mean cheaper? Does it mean more more future proof for the things that we know are coming? And then if you're not willing to change, if you're not willing to leave a mainframe, if you're not willing to leave VMs behind, then we may need to wrap APIs around that. So I think the plan that fits what you're willing to change is more effective than the aspirations that you're never going to achieve.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think that there's sometimes the juice isn't worth the squeeze, right? If you're
Yes,
trying to
yes,
refactor, sometimes you just leave things alone.
yes,
But most of the time, that doesn't fit the. If you leave things alone, it's not modernized, right? It's not changed. So you
yeah,
have to build new systems of engagement to
you
work in
do.
this, right?
I think the key, Paul, and I learned this from one of the startups I was a CTO at in Charlotte called Cloud Genera. We focused on time. And so what a lot of people look at is the cost of the destination, not the cost of the journey.
Hmm.
But how long does it take you to get there? So again, sometimes if we look at something like solar panels on your house, if the payback period for that is 50 months, that may not be worth it.
Right.
And so again, is the juice worth the squeeze? What is the benefit and how long is it going to take me to recoup that? And I think we've got to look at the financial analysis. We've got to look at the costs. I use a lot of real estate analogies too because I moved a whole lot for the audience. I bought my first house in 2002. I bought my ninth house last year,
Wow.
and I've been through my fourth kitchen remodel in 8 years. But what I've noticed, and there's a big analogy between real estate and cloud because you have to think about your budget for disruption, not just your appetite for change. How much am I willing to blow things up? Am
Yep.
I willing to take out a load bearing wall, or can I only accommodate cosmetic modernization? Because there's a level of disruption. Are you willing to work in construction dust? when it comes to your portfolio. If you can't change that, then what are you willing to do? So what a lot of people do, to your point, is they encapsulate stuff. Maybe they wrap APIs around it, which is fine, and then build the new stuff in a better way. Gemini can help with analyzing a lot of that. Things like Gemini Cloud Assist. Again, today I changed the Cloud Run app to GKE. Experiment with Gemini Cloud Assist to see if it can move from one runtime to another or back and forth. We've got really good tools, I think, for moving the same runtime to different environments. I think there's mixed success sometimes in going from, a legacy VM paradigm to a container or Kubernetes-based paradigm. But the tools are better, but they're still tested by the fact that in a lot of organizations, we've already moved the easy stuff. But here's what I'll say. I had this conversation earlier today. Legacy comes upon us faster than ever before.
Oh, sure.
Legacy used to be 5, 10 years out. Legacy may be 12 months out now.
Yeah.
So today's modern is tomorrow's legacy.
Yeah. Modernization's a treadmill. Right?
It is.
You're always running on it.
It is. It is.
Bobby, there was a lot we went over in the last, 15, 20 minutes here. There's, we're closing thoughts. What would you leave the audience? Where should they go to learn more?
To go to learn more, look at any of the sessions you saw here at Cloud Next. A lot of them had calls to action with QR codes, pointing to code labs. We turned a lot of the things we did into code labs that people can try at home. So please take a look at that. We're very responsible on social media. So if you saw a speaker and you didn't get to talk to them, ping them on LinkedIn, ping them on Twitter. We love hearing feedback from customers. I'll leave you with my executive summary that I've done before because I believe this. I feel like this should be like burned into a tombstone for people that are thinking about tackling transformation in the age of AI. My executive summary is this. AI is not the thing. AI is the thing that makes the thing better.
Yep.
So if this were food, AI is not the dish, it's the sauce or the spice to make it better. And the problem I think we're having now, Paul, is we're putting good tasting sauce on a plate and it tastes good, but there's no substance. And so don't put good sauce on a bad meal that's still a bad dish. Think about what you're doing and see whether that makes sense and then use AI to enhance that, but have the foundation be solid first.
Bobby, I love the analogies. I love the examples you're giving. It's awesome. Thank you for your insights. This has been really great having you on.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. But for now, that wraps up this episode. But we'll be back next Wednesday with another conversation diving into the tools, trends, and talents shaping the future of application development. So whether you're deploying at the edge, building with AI, or modernizing your cloud stack, we've got you covered. Be sure to follow us on social if you have any thoughts, questions, or just want to connect. Until next time, stay curious and stay builded.